I'm very happy to welcome Tim Schmidt to the show. Tim is the founder and president of the United States Concealed Carry Association, an organization that provides education, training, and insurance protection for responsibly armed Americans. And one of the things I love most about your organization is the focus on education. And education and guns seem to be inextricably linked in the news today. We have what's going on at Parkland, the horrible tragedy, and yet still another walkout being planned here to oppose the Second Amendment. These schools are supposed to be in the business of educating kids to think critically, right? But presenting kids with both sides of an argument, giving kids real factual information that will allow them to judge for themselves what they want to do with regards to guns or anything else. And what we see happening in this culture is really consistently organized international groups from George Soros across the board who are funding these kids, who are using these kids, ironically, almost as pawns, right? To promote an agenda they don't seem to be able to articulate very well. Nobody wants to be shot at. But if somebody's shooting, we all want to be able to protect ourselves. We know that Wyoming just passed a law that will allow teachers to arm themselves in the classroom. And when you consider the two different situations, we really have a huge divide in this country about how we're going to handle these things.
No, that's a great point. And the thing to understand is that it's a very common misconception that for a school to be a properly armed, that all the teachers have to carry guns. And of course, that always goes over not very well because most teachers are afraid of guns. And I understand that. But the good news is that it only takes about 5% of a group of administrators, teachers, and coaches to be discreetly armed and to get rid of all the ridiculous signs that are put all over schools saying that they're gun-free zones for there to be traction. Because ultimately, I don't care who you are, if you're a psychopath or a criminal, these guys do not want to go to places where they know they will find armed resistance. And that's all we have to do. So just a slight little twist and getting rid of the signs, now we instantly change our schools to being, instead of being, soft target shooting zones, now they become safe places for our kids. And just to make a quick, interesting comparison, this is not like a brand new experiment. We happen to do this already in places like jewelry stores, banks, airports, all the places that we want to protect, we put armed guards. Sometimes they're discreet, sometimes they're overt, but the bottom line is that it works, and we need to do this in our schools.
Well, Tim, think about how many people across the country have signs on their lawn or their door saying, this house is watched by security, and it's not. I mean, there's a huge thriving business in people putting signs out there because they know just alerting criminals to the fact that maybe this house is being watched drives them away. And yet we keep these ridiculous posters, these signs on all the school doors saying, hey, this is the one place you know you're never going to find a gun.
Exactly. And that's one of the neatest things about this concept of concealed carry is that it provides this natural, powerful deterrent effect. And you only have to have a small percentage of the population actually doing the concealed carry for it to work. Because guess what? When effectively discreetly carried, the bad guys don't know who has a gun. It could be the 79-year-old grandmother. It could be the 25-year-old girl. But again, it's a deterrent effect that really has caused crime levels to drop in every state that passes concealed carry. And the only places really that we have these mass shootings nowadays are in movie theaters, are in churches, are in schools. And the one common thread is they all put the signs up and make the policies that say that, no guns allowed, which is, again, it's like sticking your head in the sand.
Yeah, and this is what leads us all to believe, and I think quite correctly, accurately, that the people who are pushing these kind of gun anti-Second Amendment movements, they don't want responsible gun ownership. They want guns gone. And it has nothing to do with school shootings. It has nothing to do with these kind of attacks. It has everything to do with their politics, what they think the country should be, ceding control to government. I want to throw this out at you, and I know you're going to, if you haven't heard it already, I don't think it's going to surprise you. What's going on in Illinois right now, where Illinois lawmakers are trying to pass a law that will urge, if not force, schools to replace armed security guards with therapists, psychological therapists, which is just a staggering thing.
Well, believe it or not, I actually had not heard of that. But does it surprise me? Of course not. Illinois they're well known for doing absolutely ridiculous things regarding firearms or safety or self-defense in general. Now, of course, you and I both know this will have absolutely zero effect. If anything, it'll make it worse. I'm actually speechless about this. I mean, the only concept that criminals, that psychopaths understand is force. I mean, why do we call police when there are shootings? Because they're the good guys with the guns. And so to me, it only makes crystal clear sense to have the good guys with the guns there beforehand. And that's that small percentage of the teachers, the coaches, the administrators. And a lot of these people, maybe they were in the military before, they want to defend it. They want to be that first line of defense. So we're not going to be relying on the social studies teacher who's petrified of guns. Hey, don't worry, you're fine. We're going to have that small group that's going to have your back.
Yeah, it is frustrating when you think about, returning to where we started, how the anti-gun movement really does see in these kids an effort to do something they couldn't do. Before we went on air, you and I talked about this, that for how many decades and decades now has the anti-gun left failed to connect with people, failed to connect with women, failed to connect with kids, many different organizations for kids, responsible shooting organizations. They haven't been able to win the argument because there's no argument there. Yet now they're turning to kids, highly impressionable kids who've gone through the very ideologically driven public school systems, to use this moral outrage to sort of shut up people who would dare to challenge their numbers, the mistaken and the wrong facts that they're giving about guns and gun ownership. And so these kids are being mobilized without really knowing what's going on. What would you say to somebody? How do you, as somebody who is so prominent in protecting the gun rights of so many people, how do you talk to either adults or the kids they're promoting, and they point to these kids and they say, hey, these kids have been on the front line. These kids have absolute moral authority. How do you frame the arguments yourself when you come across these issues?
So for me, the best way that works for me is to actually use stories of responsibly armed citizens that have saved lives, stopped crimes, and then reference the not just handful of stories like this, but the hundreds of thousands of families whose lives have been changed because of a firearm, because of the responsible, effective, and safe deployment of a firearm. I mean, stories are essentially the only way to combat the other side of the story. Now, here's something I'll throw at you, Dr. Duke, because I think that this is going to backfire on the left. I think that this whole concept of mobilizing these children who are essentially regurgitating completely false stories and narratives or more statistics, because more people than less can see through this. So you're going to find this fascinating, but I have a list of almost 2 million responsibly armed citizens that get our weekly newsletter. And when we reverse append those folks in terms of getting some more information about them, half of these 2 million people identify themselves as Democrats. They're Democrats who at the same time want to be able to be that first line of defense for their citizens. And so when they see this sort of stuff on TV, they see it for exactly what it is, which is low-handed tactics. I really think this is going to blow up in their face.
That's an amazing statistic. Over 1 million Democrat gun owners with your association. And I was going to ask you the paradox, and I think you've confirmed it, but since these attacks on the Second Amendment have gone up since the Parkland shooting, not just the members that you currently have, are you seeing a spike in membership? What is the business of this been for you since then? I know other organizations, most notably the NRA, is boasting huge numbers rise since this. The more the Second Amendment's attacked, the more people sign on. Are you finding the same thing?
We exactly are. And I just want to quickly clarify one point so there's no misconception here. But I mean, the USCCA is all about libertarian-based, pro-freedom, pro-constitution principles. So the fact that half of the folks on our email list are Democrats is really kind of a weird thing to me. I appreciate it because, look, everyone wants safety and security for their family and loved ones, no matter what side of the political party they're on. And I personally think it's great that they're willing to come over to a team of folks who believe not just, we believe it's a natural-born, God-given right to defend yourself that was simply affirmed by the Constitution. Now, back to your question. Yes. So February of this year was hands down the biggest new membership month we've ever had in the history of the USCCA, which is essentially started in 2004. So that's quite a few years. And that's a short month. So that says a lot. And the good news is that these are people that they want to learn more. They want to be educated. They want to be responsible gun owners so that when, God forbid, they're in that situation of having to defend their family and loved ones, they're going to know what to do, what to say, what not to say, and really, be that leader that they know they're supposed to be.
I think that's an amazing point you bring up. The idea that gun ownership and protecting our families and the Second Amendment, it really is one of those issues, isn't it, Tim, that crosses all party lines, that crosses all those things that so radically divide us now as a country. It is remarkable to me how people of all different walks, one of the things we saw after that horrible shooting in Orlando, the gay nightclub that was shot up, a huge spike in gay and lesbian gun ownership, right? This idea that somehow empowerment and protection and the civic virtue that comes from being able to protect yourself, that this crosses party lines. It's not a political issue. Radical elements on both sides to some degree try to make it about politics, but we know that it's much more of a unifying issue than a dividing one.
It really is. It really is a unifying issue, and no better was this felt by me than a couple weeks ago. We had our annual USCCA Concealed Carry Expo in Louisville, Kentucky, where 15,000 people showed up to this thing to essentially, again, to learn more about responsible gun ownership, to meet some of the over 160 vendors we had there and talk about a cross-section of the USA. It was unbelievable. And getting to talk to these people and shake their hands and understand their concerns, it was very gratifying and very rewarding. And so, yes, it definitely is a nonpartisan issue. Like I said before, I say this to ad nauseum, but everyone wants safety and security for their family. I don't care what political party you're on, and that's what we're here for. That's what we do. We teach people to be that responsibly armed citizen.
Well, I'm really glad to talk to you about this. And one of the things we hit on again and again over the course of this interview is how important it is to give people correct information. That seems to be the issue, right? The more correct information we can put in front of families, the better.
That's my mission in life is to help people understand the truth and help them understand that the firearm is simply a tool that they can use for amazing things, for saving people's lives, for stopping crimes, and that's what it's all about.
Tim, it is always a great pleasure to speak with you and share the incredible work you're doing at the USCCA. Tell our audience before we go where they can learn more about your mission, about the United States Concealed Carry Association.
Sure. The easiest way is just to go to uscca.com. There's all sorts of free resources, videos, downloads, guides, and again, most of it's free. And it's a great way to take your first step to being that responsible gun owner, that responsibly armed citizen that I think deep in your heart you know that you want to be, and I'm here to help you.
Tim Schmidt, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.